class. My name is Jonathan Rorech, and today I'm going to be presenting my final intercultural communication presentation. I, like probably many Westerners, originally thought of Central American culture, behaviors, values, and norms as vastly similar. It wasn't until my first visit to a few of the countries down there that I realized how different a lot of the cultures and people and practices are. As many of you know, I will be traveling through Central America for my study abroad next summer, which involves immersing myself within 8 different countries, so 8 different cultures. The subject of this presentation is to explore the subtle and blatant differences between these 8 different cultures, discuss some of the dimensions, some stuff from our book, and just kind of give some basic insight into some of the history or people or culture of these different countries. It is important to remember when dealing with other cultures that everyone has different values, beliefs, social systems, so it's important to keep an open mind so as not to offend people and to not pass judgment on the way other people live. The ideas expressed throughout this presentation come from a variety of sources, some being our textbook, some travel guides, some anthropological studies, and some intercultural communication and exchange websites. Another important thing to remember about this presentation is that some of the stuff I discuss, they're very broad categories. They're not meant to define everyone within that culture. In no way do all of these ideas necessarily express the opinions, ideas, and values of everyone within the culture. They're kind of broad categories for, in some ways, defining these different cultures. A few things that are pretty similar and can kind of be used throughout a lot of the Latin American countries and things to consider. I think it's customary to use the formal usted when dealing with strangers or new people rather than tu until, of course, they use it first. It's common to walk into a restaurant or a cafe or the lobby of a hotel and greet everyone with buenos dias or buenos tardes, just kind of saying hello to everyone in the room. There's a lot of resentment or animosity still towards a lot of the practices of the U.S. and other Western countries. A lot of development and neoliberal globalization is still going on in Latin America or Central America specifically, and some people feel very strongly one way or the other. So just important to know kind of the history of your 2 countries so as not to offend people. It's important to dress conservatively when down there. Even though a lot of Central Americans are relatively poor, they still do a good job of trying to make themselves presentable and look nice. And so it's kind of standoffish to see a Westerner, whom many consider to be wealthy, to be dressed like a slob or a bum. Also remember that when you're going into churches or some religious sites, to make sure that you're dressed nice so as not to offend people. And when taking pictures of religious practices or customs or churches or people for that matter, it's always better to ask first rather than just pull out your camera and start taking pictures. When traveling abroad, but especially in developing countries in Latin America, it's important to remember to be environmentally conscious. Even though you may look around and see a lot of trash and it seems that maybe the locals don't care, we need to set an example as Westerners visiting, not to leave trash or, preferably refill water bottles than continually buying stuff and throwing it away. The infrastructure there for removal of trash is vastly inadequate, and the reason you'll see a lot of trash piled up is just because they have Western culture and products coming in, but they don't have the infrastructure to throw away trash. So you end up oftentimes with large builds up of refuge. And just remember, as a Westerner, just to be conscious of the environment. Another thing to keep in mind is there is a lot of, not a lot, but there is illegal trade in endangered species like turtles and coral reefs. So just be wary of what you buy, that you're not you're not furthering any of the environmental exploitations or illegal trades, to help with the local economy, that you're better off buying from locals, whether it's a local market or a bed and breakfast, local tour guides, and obviously eco-friendly places. There are a lot of eco-friendly tour guides that are very conscious about what they do when they're out in the environment. But just, buy local, buy from the local people. It helps with the local economy, and it'll be greatly appreciated. Our book talks about display rules, which are rules that govern what circumstances nonverbal expressions are required, permitted, preferred, prohibited. This includes how far apart people stand, physical contact, eye contact, the volume of your voice, your body posture, when to frown, when to smile, nice appearance, proper posture, smiling, very personal contact is very important in Latin cultures, especially in work settings or when dealing with other foreigners. A few other things to keep in mind: a lot of Latin Americans will stand a lot closer than Westerners are used to, so just don't be offended by that, and don't step back and offend them. They also tend to be a little more hands-on, which some people can see as aggressive, but it's just part of their culture. They'll may hold a handshake longer or put their hand on your arm when greeting you. Just remember, that's just part of their culture, so it's just to accept it. Our book talks about polychronic versus monochronic. We as Americans are much more monochronic. We want to do things in a specific schedule. A lot of Central Americans and Latin Americans in general are much more polychronic in time, so don't be offended if you make a schedule or time to meet someone and they're late, or they've got other people with them, or you show up for a meeting and there's other people waiting there at the same time. They value personal experience much more so than a rigid schedule of getting things done. Now I'd like to discuss some of the major differences in the countries. When our book or some anthropological studies like the GLOBE project or Hofstede's dimensions don't provide enough information, I will fill in with a little bit of historical, political, or cultural context that I feel may be relevant in helping to understand each country. Since I'll be traveling, starting in Mexico and working my way south, I figured I would go in that order of discussing the countries kind of as you move south towards South America. Before I start talking about any of the specifics, I want to just go over some of the terms that I'll be using. A lot of these come from the GLOBE project and Hofstede's dimensions. Some of it can be kind of boring and a little tedious, so I'll try to go fast, but I just want you to be aware of what I'm talking about so as you're not confused or whatever. So some of the dimensions that Hofstede came up with was power distance, which is a degree in which societies feel power should be distributed, or when power should be challenged or accepted. Another one is uncertainty avoidance. It's the degree in which societies feel uncomfortable about ambiguous or uncertain situations, or the opposite of that, how comfortable they do feel about uncertain situations. Another dimension of Hofstede is individualism or collectivism. It's the degree in which a society values either individual achievements or more of a collectivist nature, where the needs of the group, whether it's the family or whatever, take precedent over the individual. Masculinity and femininity are some other dimensions by Hofstede. They're basically the degree in which the society values masculine behaviors, the attainment of wealth or assertiveness, or kind of a dominant male role, whereas the femininity is more of like a nurturing or a caring quality of life, kind of more concerned with others. Long-term versus short-term orientation. Long-term countries plan for the future, where short-term countries are more concerned with the here and now. The GLOBE project kind of worked on top of Hofstede's dimensions and subdivided some of the categories up into a little bit further analysis. Collectivism can be subdivided into in-group collectivism and institutional collectivism. In-group is more of the values of a smaller group, say your family or your friends, your relatives, whereas institutional collectivism is the degree in which people value their jobs or the collective nature of the employees within a company. Gender egalitarianism, as defined by the Globe Project, is where cultures minimize the difference between men and women within a society. Assertiveness is kind of like masculinity. It's the extent to which cultures reward people for aggressive or non-aggressive behaviors. Performance orientation is similar to individualistic, where individual performance is more highly valued. And then we have humane orientation, which is the value to which societies place on benevolence or compassion. The information in these studies don't cover all of the countries in which I'll be going to, so I'm going to give some information, additional information in those countries where I can. But again, it's important to remember that these dimensions don't cover everyone in these societies. They're kind of broad categories for understanding. First, I'm going to start with Mexico. Mexico is relatively low on institutional collectivism and humane orientation. It has absolutely no future orientation, almost no uncertainty avoidance, and almost no performance orientation. Mexico is high on group collectivism, assertiveness, and very high on masculinity. Mexicans tend to be a lot more class conscious. Machoism plays a big role in Mexican society. So when greeting another man, it's customary to shake hands firmly. When greeting a woman, maybe give a slight bow, and don't extend your hand unless she does. We talked about this in class, but when you're beckoning someone in Mexico, it's considered very rude if I were to be like, hey, like this. Whereas you're supposed to put your hand out, palm down, and kind of doing this motion, if you can see that. The reason being is that this kind of beckoning is likened to calling of a dog, and it's considered very rude. Next, we have Belize. Belize is very different than a lot of the other Central American countries, mainly because it was a British colony, so English is their primary language, although they do have a lot of Caribbean Africans and indigenous Spanish descendants. English is their primary language, then Spanish, and then Creole is very highly spoken. You'll hear a lot of reggae in this. It's very much more like a Caribbean country than, or Caribbean island country than, say, the Central American countries. Reggae is very popular music there. So is rum. It's kind of the national drink of choice. Belizeans can be a little standoffish at first, but I think it's typically they just kind of want to get to know you before they open up. So some people see them as kind of reserved, but just be friendly and be courteous and treat people with respect, and you'll get the same from them. Tourism is a big issue in Belize, and Belizeans are very eco-conscious. They've taken big steps to protect the environment there, to attract people. They have a big coral reef system there, which attracts a lot of visitors per year for scuba diving. As visitors, be very careful when you're diving around coral reefs so as not to damage the coral reefs. Again, that's a big attraction. They want to make sure that's sustained for a long time. Guatemala is our next country. Guatemala is very low on uncertainty avoidance and institutional collectivism and performance orientation. It's relatively low on assertiveness and future orientation and humane orientation. It's relatively high on group collectivism and very high on power distance and masculinity. Guatemalans are very easygoing. They're very friendly. They're easy to talk to. They're very family-oriented and religious, primarily Catholic. Women's roles are very traditional, and as I mentioned before, it's very common to see women swimming in shirts and shorts, not actual swimming attire. 41% of the population of Guatemala is true indigenous native descendants. So there is a there's a high prevalence of that culture in the art and craftsmanship that you'll see when you're traveling around. Our next country is El Salvador. El Salvador is very low on collective institution, future orientation, uncertainty avoidance, and humane orientation, excuse me. It's relatively low on performance orientation. It's relatively high on group collectivism, very high on assertiveness, power distance, and masculinity. El Salvador is actually the most densely populated country and one of the fastest developing. It's known for its coffee exports. They did have a big civil war in the 80s, went on into the early 90s, which I think detracts a lot of tourism from the area. People still kind of think of it as maybe somewhat unsafe. El Salvadorians are known for their very hard work ethic and have some of the largest overseas remittance of any Central American country, meaning a lot of their citizens actually work abroad and send money back home. The government crackdowns on the native population in the past decades and centuries has decimated the true indigenous population. So the remaining population is very passionate Catholic and Protestant, and rather hardcore about their religious beliefs. El Salvador is known for a lot of its numerous volcanoes, but they do have a lot of their jungle has been recently destroyed by legal or illegal deforestation, resulting in the loss of a lot of native plants and animal species. Exploitation of land for crop farming is a big problem there, and deforestation along with that, which is putting a lot more plant and animals onto the endangered species list in that country. Pollution is another major problem with the rapid development. Because pollution and environmental issues are such a hot topic in this country, there has been a significant amount of violence on both sides of the environmental issue, which is sad, but people obviously feel very passionate one way or the other. Our next country is Honduras. I don't have any globe dimensions or Hofstad dimensions here, so I'm just going to give some basic background information. But tourism has plummeted significantly since 2009 when their president was ousted. A lot of this is due to negative media spin, as their former president was a big supporter of Western development, neoliberal politics, and was backed by a lot of foreign investors and governments. So the media put a negative spin on that, but their newly elected president is a left-wing socialist, which has very different values than their former president, which hopefully will be good for the country. Honduras won its freedom from Spain in, I believe, 1838, but they've had rather a tumultuous past. Their constitution was rewritten, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 17 times over a 150-year period. So a lot of continual change in that country. Hondurans are known to be very proud people and a diverse people. They have a kind of a go-with-the-flow type of attitude. Around 90% of them are descendants of a Spanish indigenous mix. They're considered to be very friendly and hospitable. According to the CIA fact book, 97% of Hondurans are Catholic, which is a very, very high rate. They're considered very tight-knit, family-oriented. Most of them live in high levels of poverty, which I mentioned. Localized crime there is also an issue. Masculinity is really high there, and women are often treated as second-class citizens, unfortunately. The ones that do work typically get about a third of the pay of a typical man in that country. In addition, the gay culture in Honduras is still very much in the closet. There have been immense urban sprawl, which has had devastating effects on the environment. They have recently dedicated about a fifth of the country to preserves, but the government doesn't have enough power to enforce illegal deforestation and development. Some reports say that around 85% of the logs that come out of Honduras are illegally logged. Mining and oil exploration and overfishing are also big problems for this country. One of the taboos for Honduras is, which I thought was kind of interesting, was you're not supposed to toss something to someone. It's considered rude, almost like as if you're tossing table scraps to a dog. So just keep that in mind. It's also common for Hondurans to point with the direction of their head or with their lips. I've never seen that, but that's what one of the cultural and anthropological websites said about Hondurans. I'll just say that's what they said. I don't know. Here we have Nicaragua. Nicaragua was rocked by civil war during the 1980s. I think it's still kind of standoffish for a lot of foreign tourism, which is unfortunate because it's actually the biggest Central American country. Has a very diverse landscape from Pacific Ocean to Atlantic Ocean with volcanoes and tropical forests, mountains, pristine beaches, really big, beautiful lakes. So it's a really nice country. And it's also now considered to be one of the 5 safest countries in all of Latin America. That includes South America as well. Nicaraguans are also thought of as vocal and proud of their politics, their art, their culture, and which can be very hot topics in conversation with Nicaraguans. Nicaragua became an independent country back in 1838 when it ceded from Spain. Most of the population there, again, is a Spanish indigenous descent, but you do have some true indigenous people and Caribbean Africans that live on the Caribbean side. They make up the majority of the population on that side of the country, although it is vastly uninhabited. There is large levels of poverty in Nicaragua. About 50% of the nation lives below the poverty line, which has kind of broken up the traditional family structure there. Many of the parents, either one or both, work overseas, where their children are raised by other members of the family or grandparents. They work abroad so they can have a chance at making more money and sending that money back. Nicaragua is much less dominated by masculinity than some of the other neighboring countries. Women here are considered absolute equals to men in society. Catholicism and Protestantism, however, are dominant religions, and so women's abortion rights are actually recently been overturned, even in the event of preventing a mother from dying in childbirth. So, a little disparity there. Like I mentioned earlier, poetry, writing, art are all big exports, cultural exports for this country, and are very relatively or very well known throughout the region and the world. Nicaragua has the largest variety of sea turtles that make it to their coast every year, but we have a lot of foreign corporations and irresponsible farming that is attributed to a lot of problems with deforestation and contaminated drinking water. A lot of locals have recently made their voice heard and voiced their opinions to the government, where recently the government allocated about 18% of the land in the country is to be portioned off as bioreserves. The new government is taking a lot more notice into ecotourism and trying to make a conscious effort of maintaining the environment there to draw in a lot of visitors just to help with the local economy. Costa Rica is very low on power distance assertiveness, relatively low on uncertainty avoidance, institutional collectivism, and performance orientation. It has almost no in-group collectivism and future orientation, but is very high on humane orientation and masculinity. Costa Rica draws in the most tourists of any Central American country with around 1.5 million a year. This country is very closely aligned with the U.S. They have encouraged a lot of foreign investors and foreign businesses to come into the country, but this has also hurt a lot of the locals, pushing them out of the markets because they can't compete with the cheap U.S. foreign goods. Costa Rica has taken an active stance in protecting the environment. In 1995, they portioned off about a third of the country to keep it as reserves to continue with the tourism. Banana and coffees are big exports in this country, while expatriate landowners and foreign investors are kind of the biggest imports. The influx of Western culture and businesses changing many of the previously held family values, while bringing in new businesses that are often damaging the livelihood and attractiveness of the country. Costa Ricans pride themselves in their good manners. They often say no when they mean yes, or yes when they mean maybe. They do this in order to remain kind of genuinely friendly. They always want to put out this friendly vibe, but it's also kind of a way to avoid conflict. Costa Ricans have the highest standard of living of any other Central American country. They have free public schools and free health care for everyone. They also boast the highest life expectancy. The majority of the population is Spanish indigenous descent, with a small minority of Caribbean Africans, Chinese, and actual true natives. About 75% of the country is Catholic, and there is very little indigenous art or on the national level. Most of the art culture is Western derived, unfortunately. The last country here is Panama. Panama has high levels of power distance, uncertainty avoidance, collectivism, and femininity. One of the fastest developing countries in Central America, yet it still maintains about a third of its country reserved for biospheres or natural land reserves. Kind of ironically, many of the locals welcomed the economic collapse in 2009 because it slowed down the development and speculative land buying, which a lot of people were trying to push back against. Panama is very different. They use the U.S. currency. The U.S. owns the rights to the Panama Canal, and Panama City is a very big, modern city, unlike pretty much any other city you're going to see in Central America. But there's a large disparity. There's a large difference between the middle and elite class and the rest of the poor. A lot of the middle elite class live in Panama City in the sky rises, or own a home at the beach or in the mountains, drive a couple cars, vacation in Europe and America, whereas a lot of the rest of the people in the country are still very poor, living in poverty and in very rural areas of the country. One of the biggest problems there with the overdevelopment is obviously degradation of the environment, deforestation, pollution, contaminated water, things of that nature. Panama is kind of the isthmus, if you will, that connects South America to Central America, and in that little area called the Darien Gap, there is a lot of native plants and animals from both Central and South America that kind of cross over that area. And so a lot of this development is endangering a lot of these animals and detracting from some of the tourism. So they have to find this balance between what can we do to develop our country further if you want to go with the Western type of development, but also finding a balance so as not to brings a lot of people, to their country. Thank you for watching my presentation. Please feel free to critique all that you want. Best of luck with everyone in their presentation. I enjoyed working and being a part of our class and interacting with all of you this semester. So thank you.